Sup? Welcome to another episode of Star Wars Minute. It's your daily podcast in which we analyze, scrutinize, and celebrate the rise of Skywalker, 1 minute at a time. I'm Alex Robinson from alexrobinson.fun.
I'm Pete the Retailer from PeteTheRetailer.com.
I'm Joe Dator from JoeDator.com, and currently speaking to you from the only building in New York City that is not a dispensary.
I'm Suzen Tekla Kruglnska, and I forgot to shut the door. And can I get up and shut the door? Can we start this over? Because I left the door open and you could hear Joe. I'm really sorry.
That's all right.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
hold on.
That's okay. We're gonna roll with it. You close the door.
Yeah, we'll do it
We'll
live.
meet you back here.
We'll do it live.
Do it live.
We'll do it live.
Yeah.
Don't move.
All right.
There's too
Now, while
much
Susan's
directing
closing the
around
door,
here.
what-
He said it. Your friend.
Well, we're talking about minute 43 today of The Rise of Skywalker, 43. And minute 43 starts with Finn demanding that Rey tell her. And it ends a minute later with Hux telling General Pride that the shuttle brought back a valuable prisoner.
Ooh.
Valuable to whom? I tend to, this is a go-to reference for me, but I've, when Rey's like, there are things you don't know. And Finn's like, well, then tell me. I really did want her to be like, like Chunk being interrogated in Goonies, where she's like, then one time in 5th grade, I knocked my sister Edie down the stairs and I blamed it on the dog. And that whole thing, she just goes on and on and on.
Yeah. And he's like, I know that. I know that too. Anyway.
Or to bust out with some useless trivia.
I was just a little too old for Goonies.
Yeah.
It just, off my
It's
radar
not-
completely. Everything else from that era, all the Spielberg stuff, E.T., you name it. But Goonies, off my radar.
I have a certain undying fondness for it, but I would never tell anybody that it's great or that they should watch it. If they haven't seen it, don't bother.
Yeah.
It's not, it's a kids can do anything movie that meant, a decent amount to me when I was a kid, roughly that age. Those kids are all around my age. So it was like, oh yeah, I liked that then. And it reminds me of, how I felt and the fun of going to movies then, but I would never recommend it to, like a lot of movies that I liked. I know enough to be like, I'm not going to be like, oh, you haven't seen Tron? It's amazing. It's not. It's great for what it is, but also a lot of that is nostalgia.
Yeah, and I did see...
And I can still enjoy it.
I did see Goonies when I was in my 40s, when I was dating someone who it was one of her favorite movies, and she was like, oh, you got to see it, you got to see it, you got to see it. And then I saw it, and I went, should have seen this when I was 12. But they hadn't made it yet. I have a suspicion that Goonies is one of the touchstone influence movies for J.J. Abrams. And I think that is maybe one of the problems I have with him. I think his scope of film knowledge and reference is limited to like 80s Spielberg movies and things like that. And I think, by comparison, like Rian Johnson, who made The Last Jedi, which I love, he's referencing silent movies in that he's got an incredible scope of film knowledge to draw from. Maybe more. And I'm sure I'm being very unfair to J.J. Abrams. For all I know, J.J. Abrams,
I think you are. I think that, I think this is a better written.
Yes, I am. I'm being unfair to J.J.
is...
Abrams. That's my goal here, to be as unfair as possible to J.J. Abrams.
I'm just giving my opinion. And I think the dialogue is better in this movie. And I think, again, that's because he knows film and he understands good dialogue. You don't just, that's again, cumulative wisdom. I think Last Jedi was more beautifully shot, and I but I how could you say there's no references here? I mean, look at Dio. I don't know, maybe Disney forced them to do Dio, but to look like a little. We'll get to that. I think there's plenty of references to interesting things in this movie that have nothing to do with what you'd expect. Some unexpected references.
Oh, I don't know about that. First of all, I disagree that this is not as beautifully shot as Last Jedi. There's some shots in this that are every bit as beautiful as the ones in The Last Jedi. I do like the photography in this movie. There's some bang-up photography. It's really, really beautiful shots, especially in that desert sequence we were just looking at. Some of that was actually gorgeous. And there's things like the water stuff that comes later on, and that big rave and that alien rave in the desert. Oh my God, it's beautiful. I want to go to that so much. Oh, how I want to go to that. It looks so much fun. And there's in this
only
minute
once
alone,
every 42 years.
yeah, in this minute alone, there's a shot that I really, really dig. In fact, so I think the photography is not my problem with this movie. It's the story.
I was just using that as one element. I'm surprised you don't appreciate
an objectively bad story. Is what I think.
I disagree, but I also I'm surprised you don't appreciate the slightly higher level of comedy in this movie. It's the comedy is quite a bit. Again, like for me, it's the writing in general. But that means the jokes are better and where they're delivered, and there's some really subtle, very subtle stuff, whereas The Last Jedi was very heavy-handed. I mean, porgs with big eyes dripping with tears watching, Chewie eat another porg is out of a Bugs Bunny cartoon.
Who loves a porg more than you? Who loves a porg more than you? And I don't just mean as food.
I love a porg. I love a porg. I love a porg.
That porg is not mine. That belongs to you.
that porg. Yeah,
the porg is mine.
That whole background belongs to me.
Porg is mine.
Yeah, he's borrowing my apartment right now. But
I've been borrowing it for a while.
So in any case, I just am surprised at how you don't notice, like, again, how, like comedy and stuff like that, which seems to be, the kind of thing you would appreciate a lot more.
Well, I appreciate the comedy in this. I have a pretty low bar for comedy. Nothing's funny. Nothing's funnier to me than I have a message for General Hugs from his mother. That's
all right.
Believe me, if you appreciate that, you appreciate all the other jokes. That's not high comedy, trust me, and I love it. But no, my problem is just I think it's just like an amateurish script. I mean, you've got these plot points that involve, like, you've got to get an inscription on a dagger. That just feels very un-Star Wars to me, and it just feels very amateurish to me. I think it's a script that feels, to me, the script feels like they cobbled it together inside of a week, which they may well have done.
There's so many things I could say about The Last Jedi.
There was a schedule,
Yeah, R2 just happened to wake up in time to give them the rest of their map. What a great plot, subtle plot
But that's
point.
a J.J. Abrams movie.
The last.
I was in The Force Awakens.
The
end of The Force Awakens.
Yeah, that is in the first one.
Oh, that's all right. Okay.
There's an explanation for that too.
But there's other.
Okay with that one. Little. But okay, we can talk about, like, the whole.
Star Wars is full of contrivances.
Understood.
And for you to suddenly have an issue with that, suddenly with this movie, I think is odd. That's what I think.
I don't know. I didn't. It was part of the reason I started to check out about a little while into the film when I first saw it, because when they're coming out with stuff like a wayfinder, and in order to get to the you have to read the inscription on the sacred dagger and get to the wayfinder. It all feels very D&D, and I never played D&D. I'm not a D&D guy. In fact, I've never played a role-playing game. In fact, I'm looking in through my history. I may have never played a game. Full stop. I'm not even sure I've played.
Games.
I don't think I've ever enjoyed a game. I'm really not a game person. I've never played a video game, but I don't even think I've ever enjoyed a board game. Just something about the whole concept of a game doesn't appeal to me. So I've never played a role-playing game of any kind. I'll tell you what I like. I don't like games. I like puzzles. I'm a puzzle guy. So I like recreation.
So, who else likes puzzles?
Mind
J.J.
recreation.
Abrams.
Oh yeah, the whole puzzle box. But I don't think those are good puzzles. I think they're puzzles where he doesn't know what the answer is, and he's just saying, "Oh no, it's a puzzle." There we go.
Right.
So,
funny you say that, because I mean, those all the things that you're talking about are exactly things that would normally turn me off.
Yeah, a whole lot of Lord of the Rings
check out of
in
it.
your Star Wars.
But it works for me here for some reason. It's just the way that the movie kind of develops, I'm on board with it. And it's like every once in a while I'll have a little bit like, I don't love that, but it's never enough to derail me, and then just pulls me to the next thing. And so I'm like, oh, okay, cool.
What was Canto Bight for you? What was Canto Bight? For me, that was problematic. And it's exactly what you're talking about. They're on a mission to find a code breaker. It's all of that stuff you were just talking about, right?
And I thought that was the weakest part of The Last Jedi.
Right, exactly.
So
right, but I mean, so either again, it's all like I watched. So this time I watched Force Awakens. I watched all three of the Disney movies in a row. And And I really did come to the conclusion they're all pretty much great movies that have similar faults. Like they all have pretty much the same faults. You can fault them all for these contrivances, for these little stupid, quests and all that stuff. And but it all washes in the wash. It's all good. It's all fun. And it's all very fun to look at. It's beautifully shot and well acted. So I'm really surprised. Like I don't understand the going, feeling like this is for some reason different from those other last couple movies.
For me, it is.
And then go backwards in time. It's, and of course they're better than the prequels. Let's, come on.
Well, yeah, but I never came out of one of the prequels. I never came out of one of the prequels feeling bummed out. And this is the only Star Wars movie I ever came out of the theater and I really felt like bad, like bummed out. And no matter how bad the prequels got, I was always thrilled by them. And it's not because I was a kid either. I was already 40 when the prequels were coming out. I was in my late 30s, so I was already past the point where one should have been excited to see Attack of the Clones a second time, but I came out of Attack of the Clones. I was thrilled. I couldn't wait to see it again. I must have seen it multiple times in a theater, and I was ostensibly a grown man. I was chronologically a grown man at that point. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not like I'm just nostalgic for my childhood. Every one of those movies, as crummy and stupid and silly as they were, thrilled me, and I still enjoy them. This is the only time I've ever come out of a Star Wars movie feeling bummed out.
We couldn't be more on a different page because the prequels broke my heart. I remember seeing the first one. I went by myself. I was living in Chicago. Nobody else was around to see. I had no other Star Wars fans. I went by myself and I was crushed. And, I don't know how you can compare that to this movie. This is such a good movie. I don't understand it, but that's,
I don't know, it just didn't work. It made me feel bad the first time I saw it because of these things that were so disappointing, like just the whole, obviously the big thing is making Rey part of some royal family, which was, it was so important to me. We need to... that Rey was a character who had come from nowhere, and that she was somebody who could use the Force because anybody can use the Force. And the way the Last Jedi ended was showing you this kid with a broom can use the Force. Anybody can access the Force. Not everybody can access the Force, but you don't know where someone who can access the Force could come from. And that was sort of set up in Rogue One with Imri Chirrut. Was that his name? Chirrut Imri? Yeah. He obviously doesn't have Force ability, but he is able to, in some way, access the Force, or believes he can. And it opened up this idea, which harkened back for me to 40 years earlier, which harkened back to when I first saw Star Wars and first got introduced to the concept of the Force. It felt like something that could occur anywhere, and anybody could use it. And I started to think, maybe I could... use it later on. And then, later on as an adult, I studied Buddhism, and I realized there's a way you can almost use the Force. You can be so tuned into your surroundings. You can look and listen and keep the inside of your brain quiet and be so tuned into what's happening around you that you almost end up seeming like you have some sort of extrasensory intuition. You don't, but it can seem that way. And so the idea that anyone can use the Force meant a lot to me. And so hearkening back to that idea, then of course when they introduced midichlorians, I was like, oh boy, rolling. Yeah. Oh, eye rolling.
Right,
we all rolled our eyes.
That was terrible. That was terrible.
Yeah, so this,
Nobody's
The Last Jedi
anything like that
brought it back around to where it should have been, where, this Force ability can occur anywhere. And then this movie just threw that in the garbage, and it really broke my heart, and I never recovered from it.
Sorry, guys. Finn, it's implied here, even Finn may have a little bit of Force. There's a lot of implication. They never let go of that implication that anybody, a little kid, anybody can access the Force. But that's separate than Rey being this really special person, this really special person who has some really amazingly different qualities, almost really a Messiah kind of thing. It's a little bit like that. Luke was like that before. There's a little bit of a Messiah thing. It's a different level. And so I think you can have both things at once. I don't think this is discarding any of that. Now, I think you have your own personal... Why can't a Messiah come from nowhere? Why can't a Messiah come from nowhere? You have your own personal reasons for feeling this way, I think.
That's true. And I don't want to go too much into that. But Yeah, I mean that's kind of a true fact, because I was somebody who never had connections or like family connections for most of my life. I never had any knowledge of my origin or my ethnicity or who my family
He was
were
adopted,
at all. I was an adoptee, and so when I would see things about like, well, this was passed on to you by your family, I always would think I would feel left out of that. Like, well, where does that leave someone like me? And so having Ray there, who simply is who she is cut off and independent from her origins, and that mirrored the way I'd felt most of my life. So yeah, as a character, I really latched onto that part of her character. Yeah, that's true. That's a personal note about me. But it's not just about me. It's about a lot of people like me. I don't mean it just for me. There's millions of people like me. There are dozens of us. And so
it's not like in this though. It's not like they find like, oh, you're a Palpatine, and then she goes like to Palpatine family dinners, and it's just like part of that now. It's just like she finds out who her. Well, again, I don't 100% buy it because this information is coming from sources that have an agenda.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily 100% buy that she is related to.
Well,
Palpatine,
that's interesting.
That's a whole
now
separate
that's
thing.
an interesting thing, because you're right. The movie perhaps leaves it open to interpretation, but then again, she does shoot the stuff out of her fingertips, like her putative grandfather.
I think in the context of like, not growing up without a family, not knowing who your family is, this does a beautiful job with that, and I think I'm surprised again that you're disappointed in how they handled that, because in a way it seems to me like
I'm very disappointed.
they handled it in a way that you would have liked, because it's like, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. She's like, I'm sorry. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. It's like, forget that. I'm a Skywalker, and she's not, but she is, right? And I think that's a really beautiful message that, I think that to me, it would seem like that's
You're
a
right,
message.
But she could have taken up that, by the way, bleep, forget that. She could have taken up that name no matter what. What I'll tell you why I think it's objectively poor writing is because what was set up in the previous movie was this very exciting concept in the final scene of this kid from nowhere with a broom being able to access the Force. And if you're saying the payoff to that is in the next movie, 2 moments where Finn sort of twitches and goes, "Hey, I feel funny," that's not taking that story to the next level. That's not continuing what was set up before.
Here's the last thing I'll say is I think you're taking away the specialness of Rey. That's what I think. I think you're kind of demoting her if you think that, I think you can have both things, anyway.
Does anyone else have anything specific to minute 43?
That's what I was going to say. Speaking of Rey and her Force abilities and her inner conflict and her origins, she does say in this minute is where she says she had a vision of the throne of the Sith, and it was her. And Finn was like, "Oh, and Kylo Ren was on it." And she was like, "Yeah, Ren and I, like both of us."
Yeah,
and like I feel like I would have liked to have seen that vision of the two of them together.
Yeah,
on the throne.
Like ventriloquist act.
Yeah, like she's sitting on his lap. No, but like I feel like they did give us a little glimpse of Dark Rey, but I would have liked to have seen but again, it's not a very Star Wars, not in the language of Star Wars film that much to see these kinds of visions, but to see that kind of like, the two of them sitting on a throne, like on a throne together with like a dark kind of to show me a vision of that might be interesting. I'd like to see that. I'm sure somebody has probably done, illustrations of that, painted it, whatever. I'd like to see that, but
I think
it seems like if you've mentioned that, it would be interesting to throw that out there, what that would look like.
And I think the Sith throne should be a portmanteau. The Sith throne.
Oh, yeah. I got to go to the Sith throne.
Sith throne. Sith throne.
Ask your doctor if Sith throne is right for you.
Ask your doctor if Sith
Have
throne
we
is
ever?
right for you. Yeah.
Have we ever seen a female Sith? Is she the only pseudo-female Sith we've ever seen, or is there any real female? Is there anyone in that whole audience ever? Do we ever see a female Sith? I don't think so.
Well, the Inquisitors.
Live action? No, I don't.
We were supposed to see the Sith Witch in the
yeah.
prequels, but they decided it was too scary, right? Remember that illustration?
Obi-Wan series had.
Mm-hmm. That's true, yeah. The Obi-Wan series. Are they kind of Sith, though, the Inquisitors?
They're not.
There's only 2, so we've only seen 2 Siths, or 3, I guess, if you count Kylo Ren. But
yeah. But I remember that there was a lot of there was concept art of female Sith for the Phantom Menace that was done, and they decided, oh no, this is way too terrifying for kids, because somebody had done this like really, really scary sort of like, it was almost like something out of a Japanese horror movie, and it was really frightening. And I think, I don't know if that concept has ever been picked up again and used.
They took the early concept art for Dooku and before they realized they can get Christopher Lee, and then turned it into Saj Ventress, who's in the animated shows. Ventress is a female Sith.
Yeah, and I've never seen that. I've never seen that.
And pretty cool looking.
Yeah, what do you think of the TIE fighters dragging the Falcon?
Yeah, that's my next... it's interesting to see them towing things. They're using their harpoons and tow cables, I guess.
Yeah. Which they have.
But it's an interesting shot, first of all, that you see it kind of fly by and then you see the cockpit's empty. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's
a cool shot.
It's a really cool shot.
Empty
it's
cockpits.
A really cool shot, and I like that a lot.
But then I thought two things that bug me about this. One is like, why would they tow it and not just fly it, not just have somebody in there? Like, imagine like you see the Millennium Falcon and cut to the cockpit, and there's like TIE fighter pilots sitting in there. That would be shocking.
That's true.
As much as I love this shot, that would be like, whoa.
That'd be good.
Why tow it and not fly it?
Or more importantly,
why does it say why
something wrong
tow
with
it
the tractor beam?
Yeah, that's what I was going to
Could be.
Yeah.
say.
Why tow it with cables and not tractor beam?
Because it looks cool.
Why not?
That's the fun of Star Wars. It's the fluidity of technology. If it looks cool, we go with it. And in this case, it looks cool to have it being towed by TIE fighters. Yeah, it looks really neat. And so, the technology is whatever they need it to be for that scene.
But then I read in the novelization, in Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, expanded edition novelization by Ray Carson, I read that they were towing it to the incineration hangar. And that came up because, like, why bother? Why not just, if you're going to destroy it, why not just destroy it in situ? Like,
blast it out of the sky.
Blow it up there. Blow it up on Pasana. Don't worry about it. And then B, if you're going to tow it all the way out here, like, then if you're not going to fly it, you're going to tow it and then incinerate it. It seems like an odd choice there.
In my headcanon, Han, Lando, it's the Kane brothers, all those people have done so many customizations and things to it that someone who isn't familiar with it would be, other than Rey, of course, who can do anything she puts her mind to, no one can fly it without, because it's so, it's like a customized thing. That's in my head. That's what it would be the case. So maybe they tried to fly it at first and they're like, this is ridiculous.
Nobody Ray left with the keys.
That's what I was thinking.
So they were like, all right.
Yeah. And they couldn't get the Irving boys on the phone.
Yeah.
Has anyone done the backstory on the Irving boys yet? Because that's, if I had one part of Star Wars that they let me write, that would be the one I'd want.
I still think we need a little kind of, not quite the scope of the, Tales of Mos Eisley Cantina or certain point of view books, but I would like a collection of short stories tracing the provenance of the Millennium Falcon, the ownership of the Millennium Falcon. And we can even throw some other ones in there, but great. Start with somebody before Lando, because it's implied in Solo that Lando, maybe got it, maybe he didn't outright own it because there's a boot on it when they get to it. So start with whoever's before Lando, do a story about Lando, do a story about Han Solo, then do a story about, the Irving boys and Duquesne and Unkar Plutt, maybe throw somebody else in there in the meantime.
That scene in Solo may have been him stealing it, for all we know.
Yeah.
So
no, because there was already capes. There were already capes. And
that's
stuff
true. He already had.
He had
a good supply of capes in there. Yeah.
Well, speaking of,
but I would read that book.
That's you should write that book. Not read it. Write it.
Come on. Let's.
Once we finish this one. Speaking of the Falcon modifications, if you remember a couple of years ago when Poe was doing that light speed skipping thing, in the Star Wars Visual Dictionary, there's a little note saying that Rose Tico installed gravimetric compensators, which made suborbital hyperspace jumps safer. So Rose put in some kind of thing that enabled this light speed skipping thing to go on.
Oh, before the light speed skipping.
I have to assume. But
Or I thought, like, see, they came back and they were like, all right,
Yeah.
if you're going to do that again, we got to come up with a solution as to what
Yeah, you guys
what was the damage that was done. Okay.
you guys are lucky to be alive after that. Yeah.
Yeah.
so
And,
yeah.
Hey, while we're talking about Lando, former owner of the Falcon, I did want to recall now when the Falcon is we last saw the Falcon on Pisana, there was a whole scene in the novelization of the Rise of Skywalker expanded edition by Ray Carson. There was a whole scene where Lando sees the Knights of Ren kind of breaking into the Falcon while it's parked there, and he gets all upset and he's like, they're not going to do that to my ship. And that's part of what turns him from being like, my fighting days are over, into being like, I need to, I'm going to join with the rebellion and they need pilots. I'm going to go get my ship back. And it's very, I'm exaggerating the emotions behind it a little bit. It's a very brief scene, but that also then makes me think, because we saw more of Lando and we saw him kind of looking at the Falcon and that whole thing, I think then when we see, I think there's supposed to be a little bit of obfuscation here and a kind of a misdirect, that when we see the shuttle taking off and we see it explode and we're like, oh, Chewie died. And then like, hey, well, we got the Millennium Falcon and there was somebody else there. We got a very valuable prisoner. You might think that, they got
Like they mean
Lando.
Yeah.
Right. Which I think I kind of did for half a second, maybe in the theater. But
Well, it would have only been half a second, because then immediately cut to the reveal anyway.
We'll see.
So
We'll
it's not,
see.
you're
We'll
not,
see.
you're not in
We'll see.
suspense.
I-
You wouldn't
we
have been
don't
in
see the
suspense
reveal
very
here.
long.
Susan, how
No.
long has it been since we lost
It's-
Chewbacca?
I'll tell you, because I got
Yeah.
a clock. I have a clock. I've been
good.
keeping track. Chewie death clock. And it's been exactly 2 minutes and 3 seconds. 2 minutes and 3
Wow.
seconds. Whoops.
It just seems like a second ago, doesn't it?
yeah.
The nose keeps, well,
And in
Anyway.
Wookiee years, that's like, what, 20 years or something? So that's a long,
I think
time.
it's like 4 seconds.
We've been
or something.
mourning for 2 minutes and 3 seconds. I know I have
Yeah.
been. I know I was. I was at the time.
Well, Chewie's
Yeah.
like
Morning for 2 minutes and 3
230,
seconds.
240 or something like that, or 250. And we don't know like what the difference is between human and Wookiee years, but maybe in Wookiee years he's 1,000.
1,000
Oh,
dog
yeah.
years.
Right.
Right.
And in
Well, we're not allowed to say that he's a dog.
no, why
He
not?
can say that.
Wait,
We can't
what?
say that.
Oh, I see. Because it's
Okay.
racist. I didn't even think of that.
No, I mean,
Racist.
well,
Racist. These are your first steps. Racist.
One last thing about the Falcon, and it's kind of a sidebar. One thing I was disappointed in with the film, as speaking as a kind of summing up of the Star Wars saga to this point, I was a little disappointed they didn't at least tip the hat to the fact that L3 is inside the Falcon thing. You know what I mean? Like when Lando goes on the ship, some kind of thing, or anyway, that was it. But as we all know, they distance themselves as much as they can from Solo because they are a bunch of gutless cowards. So
Yeah, I know. It's just so many things that were not followed up on that I wish had been followed up on. You know, they could have been.
Yeah.
But that would have been pretty. I don't know. It just would have been awkward and weird, though. I mean, what's he gonna do? Lando's gonna get back on the Falcon and he's saying, "Hey, girl, you're looking fine still. Let's maybe think about getting a bottle of wine later, just you and me." Or, I mean, what's gonna happen? Where is that gonna go? I don't know.
well, even just in the scene where he was piloting the Falcon, you could have him say something like, we got to do the coordinates, right, L3? And then like
Right.
a hollow voice, says,
They could have had
"Got
her.
it,
They could have
Chief,"
had
like,
Phoebe
or whatever.
Waller-Bridge come and voice over it, and say something
Totally.
like, "Oh, you finally come back.
Like-
By the way, you look like crap." Just something
Yeah.
snarky like that.
So you'd be like, oh, yeah, well, right. What was your name again? Larry?
Yes. Hardly remember you. Barely made an impression.
Well, before we close things, does anyone else have anything? I was going to ask Joe for his next entry in the 50 Things You Don't Know About Star Wars Part 2, unless anyone has
Well, I'm
anything
glad you asked.
specific
I'm
to
glad
this
you
minute.
asked, because I do have some more of the top 20 things you didn't know about Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Are you ready?
Sock it to
I
us.
think so. Yeah.
All right. Number 5. Scenes that didn't make the final cut include several moments when Kylo Ren talks to a trio of cartoon mice that act as his conscience. Mm-hmm. Another
I
one?
can buy
Good.
that.
Ready
Disney.
for another one?
Yeah.
Number 3. Also in an early version of the script, when asked her last name in the final scene, the name Ray gives is Ricigliano.
Italian again. This is
I would-
Right, yeah.
We talked a lot about being Italian on this episode there, so it would have
That's
been
a spicy meatball.
nice reveal for me. And maybe that would have made me, feel better about Ray's origin story. I would have said, well, at least, comes
Yeah.
back around to something I can relate to. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I would have liked to hear Daisy Ridley say that.
All right. I guess that will wrap up minute number 43. You guys want to come back tomorrow?
I think so.
Yeah,
What's
yeah,
tomorrow?
one
What
more
day
in,
is
yeah?
tomorrow?
Me?
Is that
So I have
Thursday?
an option? Do I have a vote?
Or is this
Can
Thursday?
I'll do it. I'll do it.
All right, Pete's in.
Come this far.
So,
I'm in.
all right. Okay.
Another
Got the
day.
whole set.
Yet another day. We're committed. It's a deal.
Well, dear listeners, you've heard of Godfather Minute, you've heard of ABCDTOS, you've even heard of Alphabetical, but did you know that Pete and I have started a brand new podcast every week called Who Died? Or Who Died?
Who died?
No
With
question.
Pete and Alex.
Yes, Who Died with Pete and Alex. Every week we will go over some of the famous and infamous and otherwise noteworthy people who shuffled off the mortal coil to any particular given week. Joe was our first guest on the show, doing a
And last
tribute
guest.
to the late so far to
It's our late cast.
to the late great Sam Gross. So people should check that out. You can find it wherever you get podcasts or currently on the Star Wars Minute YouTube channel. So check that out. I'm sure
You can
Pete is
go-
putting a link right here.
Just, whodied.xyz. It'll take you to. You can link it to listen or to watch anywhere. Whodied.xyz.
And then you can live it up with us tomorrow on another brand new Star Wars Minute.
Minute.
Star Wars minute.
Star Wars Minute. The minute of Star Wars.
Bye.